Meeting of the Hearings and Engagement Committee open, and note the presence of Deputy Ewan and Wilson and Councillor Maxim Van Ooston. I understand we have apologies from Councillor Her Worship the Mayor, Councillor Ryan Hamilton, Councillor Dave McPherson, Councillor Angela Leary, Councillor Mark Bunting and Councillor Rob Pascoe, and also I think is Councillor Kish with us, or she?
Not currently.
Not currently, so apologies for Councillor Kish for lateness and potential early departure.
You only need
3. Right, I'm just forgive me, I'm waiting for the technology, and we are going up. Right, and we are now. I move the apologies, Councillor Wilson. Seconded, Councillor Van Ooston. All those in favour, that's contrary, carried. We now move to item 2, confirmation of the agenda, and you have the run sheet in front of you, and obviously the quorum today is 3. I will move the confirmation of the agenda as tabled. Seconded, Councillor Van Ooston. All those in favour, those to the contrary, that is carried. Do we have any declaration of interest in terms of the items in front of us? There appears to be none. We now confirm the Hearings and Engagement Committee open minutes of the 1st of December 2020. Councillor Wilson moves. Councillor Van Ooston, you were present at that?
I was.
Yep. Right, thank you. All those in favour, those to the contrary, that is carried. We now go on to item 5, parking restrictions and traffic bylaw changes. Robin, would you like to join us at the table?
Good morning, councillors. So this morning we have quite a short report for parking restrictions and traffic bylaw changes. So the first one we have for London Street is associated with a proposed development on the corner of London and Anglesey. I'd describe it as the south-western corner if you consider Anglesey to be kind of heading north. So at the moment it's just a big car park basically, and the Waikato Blood Bank are looking to have a purpose-built building put in there, and we'll have some basement parking for their clients, their visitors, and so there's just a few changes that we need to do there to accommodate a new vehicle crossing that they're putting in place. The key change really is that the new vehicle crossing just impacts on one of the mobility parks that we have in that street. So we've been in contact and worked with CCS Disability, and they have confirmed that they still need to have something in that general area, noting that the blood bank will have specific mobility car parks within the basement as well. So we are just setting that up back one space to cater for that. So a loss of a couple of parks, but retaining the mobility park in that area. So that's the first one. I'm happy to take any questions on
perhaps
that.
let's take questions on that as we go. Councillor Van Ooston.
Just in regards to the moving of that park, is it any easier or more difficult to access that car park in your view?
No, it'll be fairly much the same. What we will need to do is put a cut down for them so that they can then get easily up onto the footpath. At the moment, I think they actually use the vehicle crossing, which probably has a small lip on it. So once we've done that work, it'll actually be probably a little bit easier to actually get from the vehicle up to the footpath area.
Okay. And no more difficult to access the car park from the roadway?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Much the same.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Right, we'll go to the next, which is the Nisbet Street, is that right?
That's correct.
One-way road.
Yes, so Nisbet Street's an interesting one that is a well-used one by anyone who's in the know for parking, if you get to work nice and early. So that's it's almost like a little laneway that runs parallel with Ward Street and sits just below the Wintec. It's got a very interesting history as a road, so it was actually gifted to council and sits under an endowment type status. And recently, when we've been doing some work with the Tuapapa development, which is the big development on the corner, it was determined that we hadn't actually put in place any restrictions on that road, either for parking or direction. So we sought legal advice in the first instance to actually check that we could legally put something in place. And if I paraphrase the legal opinion, it looks like a road, it smells like a road, it acts like a road, therefore we can treat it as a road and we can deal with managing restrictions and controls through the traffic bylaw. So for this report, we are just formalising the one-way direction that's already in place for Nisbet Street. At the end of March meeting of this committee, we will be bringing a proposal from the Tuapapa site, which will look at some parking changes within Nisbet Street. But at this stage, all we're doing is just tidying up and formalising that one-way direction.
So just remind me again, the legal status now of what we call Nisbet Street?
The legal status hasn't as such changed, so it's still endowment.
Right.
But when it comes to how we manage it as a road controlling authority, council's ability to manage it, we've been given legal advice that we can use the traffic bylaw in order to manage traffic type movements and restrictions. So the one-way direction, time restrictions, loading zones and that sort of thing can all be formalised through the traffic bylaw.
So basically, in spite of its status, it is still legally, the advice is it is still legally, can be legally subject to appropriate bylaw, and which gives effect to appropriate traffic control and parking management.
Correct.
Right. Any questions on that? Councillor Van Oosden?
The blue lines that you have marked out on page 23 look like there's access straight through to Anglesey Street in a one-way direction, is that correct?
So the blue line is basically just setting out the legal piece of road.
Okay, thank you.
In the olden days, you used to actually be able to drive all the way down to the end of Nisbet Street, and then there was actually a ramp that took you through to Anglesey Street. That was closed off when we did the PwC piece of work.
Yep.
So yes, those blue lines basically just outline the land footprint per se that has that status. And Mavis, I think they've changed their name. They still have access through there, and the Wintec still come down off the top of the hill and run round through there as well.
And the exit goes at the back of the PwC building, is that correct?
It comes out onto Ward Street, yes.
And any restrictions that you're placing will have no bearing on deliveries, etc., through to Mavis, and I think also the atrium, does that have...
Yeah, so basically the one-way restriction just goes through to the Wintec car park entrance, so it's from Tristram Street to the Wintec car park. From there it's two-way. All we're doing is formalising exactly what's in operation now. We're not changing anything.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much, Chair.
Are there any other questions on Nisbet Street? We now move to Victoria Street, Register 4, Cycle Paths and Register 11, Turning Movements, page 24. Robin?
So further to discussions at yesterday's Infrastructure Operations Committee, we are seeking to formalise a right turn facility for cyclists who are northbound on Victoria Street and wanting to turn onto the Claudelands Bridge.
Can you just remind us again, just as a general process, because I'm aware of this is obviously a totally separate committee, totally
Correct.
separate decision-making process, totally separate criteria as a regulatory committee. Can you just remind us again, generally, what is the process by which such proposals are duly advertised?
So for this one, it's a piece of work that has been ongoing for about 6 months. And has been identified as being one of the sort of key connections through to the Claudelands Bridge, and builds upon the work that was done for improving cycling across the Claudelands Bridge. We have, as staff, been looking at a number of different permutations and combinations to how we could actually make it legal and safe for cyclists to make this manoeuvre. As currently they basically have to weave in amongst pedestrians and then try and work out how to hook onto Claudelands Bridge. The consultation that we have been doing has been primarily with Bike Waikato, and those various iterations of design we have been sharing with them. We have also been working very closely with Waka Kotahi because there was some concern as to how we were intending to set up the traffic signals, which is basically allowing cyclists to make a right turn but not allowing vehicles. So it's a dedicated turn for cyclists. And checking with Waka Kotahi, the transport agency, to make sure that that was all legally able to be done. And I guess this has been part of an ongoing process and reported through the general manager's updates to the infrastructure and operations. I'm trying to remember the infrastructure and operations committee since August last year.
So in terms of general road design, whether it's Palmerston Street, Victoria Street, this is no more or less than what else we do around the city.
Correct. So when we look at the work that we're planning to do, we have a look at who we think is going to be impacted by it. So for Palmerston Street, there was some general public consultation throughout that period, throughout the proposal and that length, and where we were looking at putting raised platforms or affecting people's parking and that sort of thing, we had specific consultation with them. For this one, our focus has primarily been with Bike Waikato because it was making sure that we ended up with a facility that that the users would also be comfortable with. We've looked at the impact that the reduction, because in order to accommodate the cycle lane, we will be losing a section of traffic lane. So for the short section between Claudelands Bridge and Ward Street, there is currently sufficient room for cars to have double lanes, so cars side by side for that short section. By putting in the right turn cycle facility, we're losing that short length of stacking. We've done monitoring over the last month or so and had a look at just exactly what the numbers of cars through there are, and there will be an impact on about 5 cars that will need to move to the back of the queue. We don't think that that's going to create any problems at all, and are reasonably comfortable that this proposal will work without any difficulties.
But inevitably with any traffic design change, after it's been put in place, of course, there's intensive ongoing micro-monitoring immediately, but that would be standard.
Yes, and in this case, what we're going to do is once we've got the legal ability to set this up, is we will do it as a temporary traffic management setup, which will enable us to just check that we've got everything working nicely before we finally put in the final solution. But yes, we're reasonably comfortable that the traffic volumes through there, it's not going to create any major issues.
Councillor Van Oosten, and then Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And Robin, you talked about Waka Kotahi and the lights situation, the right turning. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about what that signal will be. I draw your attention to the Victoria Bridge and Victoria Street intersection where the buses have
Correct.
the shoot through, there's a large B which allows them to do that rather than an arrow or a straight green light. I wonder if you could just tell us about what will be in that.
I'm not sure exactly what the actual symbol will be. I'd need to come back to you on that, but I know that that's the sort of discussion that we've been working through with Waka Kotahi as to how we make it clear that that's for cyclists.
I guess I draw your attention to that because if it were to be a simple green arrow,
Yes.
then we may face some difficulties with motorists who
That's-
will likely want to also take that journey.
Yes, and that's why we've been having those discussions with Waka Kotahi to determine exactly what we can do to make that legal for cyclists, but still remain illegal for cars.
Yeah, and we'll have that well in advance of the June implementation.
Yes, I'm sure that the guys probably have that detailed information. I just don't, so I'm happy to follow up and get that out to elected members.
And I saw June somewhere. I don't think it's in this paper, is it?
That was in the Infrastructure Operations Committee.
Right, and so that's the expected go live time?
Yes, we again, I just need to confirm the exact timing. So the key thing at this stage is making sure that we can get the traffic signals up and running and operational before we put anything in place first. So that's allowing some time for that work to happen.
And so back to our Chair Gallagher's points around consultation, will that give us then an opportunity to be able to educate the public about what's coming, and do you have a plan to, and how you might want to roll that out?
Yes, so I guess we'll be looking for an education program around this, and it's a good opportunity to reiterate the Sharrow markings because they will be added on Victoria Street at the same time. So we'll use that as part of an education awareness campaign for that intersection, yes.
Okay, thank you. Is it also the opportunity to promote the work that's done on the Claudelands Bridge and the priority that cyclists have in that space?
Very much. I see this as being an ongoing story about the Claudelands Bridge, the connections across the river, and just how we're progressively making that work better.
And there's the opportunity also to involve Bike Waikato in that campaign?
Yes, we're always keen to work with all of the different advocacy groups depending on the work that we're doing and to get the promotion and information out as wide as possible. So we certainly do share all those sorts of things and encourage any of our advocacy groups to share that through to their members, etc.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you, Chair.
I just acknowledge, obviously, the presence, of course, of Councillor Kesh, Naidu-Rolfe and Councillor Sarah Thompson. I'll take, obviously, Deputy Chair Ewan Wilson for questions, then I acknowledge Naidu-Rolfe, Councillor Naidu-Rolfe for the next question. Deputy Chair Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Martin. Robin, could you explain why we or you have chosen so far not to remove the 3 car parks that would have enabled us to maintain 2 car lanes heading north and still left sufficient space for a dedicated cycle lane to turn right?
So at this stage we don't believe that we need to maintain the 2 lanes of vehicle flow through that intersection. And the initial temporary traffic management that we put in place will allow us to monitor that and to determine that. It is an option to do the removal of that parking. It comes at an extra cost because obviously there's some curb lines that would need to be altered, and we'd need to also be very certain that we didn't create an issue with any of the overhanging verandas and that sort of thing. We do know that there's developments proposed and on that corner, and early discussions with them, some of the proposals that we've had did see that as being quite an important location for a loading zone. But I don't think that we've precluded that as an option if we need to. We just don't think at this stage we need to.
Right. through you, Mr. Chair, I'm still not comfortable, having listened to your response to Councillor Maxine's questions regarding exactly what sort of traffic signal would be used to indicate to the cyclist that they are good to turn right. What I think I understood you to say is we are going to move towards a traffic light.
Correct.
With a cycle that comes up as a, I mean, I've seen them in other parts of the world where it's a cycle that comes up green or red, and you're going to have that in place when you trial this?
That's yes, correct. That's why we're looking at, we need a little bit of time to get the traffic signals sorted before we then put the actual cycle lane in place.
And the arrow on the road, if you're looking across the road now, so as though you've not taken the turn to the right, I see there is an arrow that indicates you could turn right or continue on Victoria Street. Are you intending to remove that as well?
Yes, that'll all get tidied up. The plan, I guess, was just superimposed onto an existing aerial, so it's not a clean copy per se.
So if we wanted to support this in principle, but want to see the detailed, finalised, exact implementation plan, including confirmation of the lights, confirmation of what you are removing, what road markings you're going to put that is clearly going to show cycles only, and how you're going to manage the loss of that lane. Would that work for you?
We can do. It's just an extra cost to produce such plans. At this stage, in order to implement it, we don't need detailed plans like that. But yes, it's something that we can do if that would make the elected
I'm just
members
wondering
more comfortable.
again, the point, certainly hear what you're saying, Deputy Chair, the point of process, at what point would we instruct, in this case, request that staff report on the final detail to the Infrastructure Committee? So we give effect to the regulatory side of this to enable the right-hand turn, but I'm just trying to think of due process and help me here, because whether we would just request that staff, report that as a special item back to the Infrastructure Committee. I'm open to your views too, obviously.
I would have thought natural justice, which is at the heart of any planning process or hearing process, would require us to have the actual information and the ramifications of our decision in front of us, to have satisfied our obligations, to have heard the evidence and to have understood the information. And so having that information in detail form go to another party or another mechanism, I don't know if that meets our...
So you would be proposing a approval subject to?
Correct.
Subject to. So...
And I think I'd be sending a message for future that please don't come to a meeting such as this without that detail, because surely we need to understand the detail to be able to decide whether or not this is appropriate.
Okay, so what I propose at this point is obviously, because there's going to be discussion following the questions, and then I'm anticipating you may or may not do an amendment to the recommendation.
Because the subset, Mr. Chair, the subset of that is how could have we engaged with affected parties, Cycle, Waikato and others, without that detailed work?
So I guess Cycle
Yeah, Robin.
Waikato are used to working through plans like this with us. So we do sit down with them and explain. And a lot of the cycle works like this. This is the sort of plan. Can I suggest, rather than perhaps infrastructure ops, that the March meeting of this committee would be probably an appropriate forum to bring it back to, if that would work better?
Right, so I'm anticipating the Deputy Chair is going to move an amendment to the recommendation. I'll move the recommendation. I'm anticipating Deputy Chair will move an amendment. So if you don't have further questions, I'm going to go to Councillor Cash. Is that all right? And you'll work on the appropriate wording. Councillor Naidi Rolfe.
I'm happy to second
Sorry?
I'm happy to second the motion.
Right. Okay. Councillor Naidi Rolfe.
Thank you, and thanks, Robin, for explaining the detail. Just a couple of questions just to clarify. So you said that the team's already done some work to analyse the impact of closing that lane to cars. So are you saying that there's the risk of creating a bottleneck effect, would you say that it would be quite low?
Correct.
And have we analysed if it would lead to congestion in a cumulative effect down the road, or have we only monitored that intersection?
So we've had a look at the traffic volumes and the queuing that happens there, and the indication is that because it's such a short length of double lane anyway, but the stacking was only getting back to Ward Street. So if you take the two lots of traffic and then put them behind each other, you're going to get back to about Alma Street. Victoria Street is a 30k environment. It is a slow environment, and we, as I said, are not concerned that we're going to be creating any great effect with this proposed change. By approving the turns and allowing us to put it in as a temporary traffic management type proposal, we can confirm that prior to moving into a more formal final format.
So does that mean, for example, you'd close off the lane temporarily and then assess going on before making it more permanent? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And in regards to consultation, I mean, you mentioned that you talked to Bike Waikato, and so from my understanding, there's no need to speak to anyone else?
For these sorts of things, we tend to look at the impact on the adjacent businesses or properties, and we don't believe that this is going to have an impact on adjacent businesses or properties. When it comes to the wider public, we think it's a very minimal impact on the motoring public through this section, so we haven't put anything wider.
Okay. And what else did I have? In the thinking that went into getting to this result, were there discussions about having that cycle lane as a shared lane for allowing both cars and cycles to turn right?
There has been a right turn ban for this particular movement for many years. We didn't consider putting it back in for motorists. It will affect the efficiency of the intersection by allowing vehicles to make that move, and at this stage our understanding around Victoria Street is we're not trying to encourage that as a through route. We're trying to encourage Victoria Street to be used by people who have something within Victoria Street, that section as a destination, doing business, etc., etc. By putting a right turn facility in there, I think you'll just be encouraging the use of Victoria Street instead of Anglesea. So it wasn't something that we considered.
Okay, cool. And last question, is there a media release or some sort of communication about this happening to the wider public?
yes, there will be a comms and education component around this project, the increased use of the sharrows and how that all relates to the work that's been done previously on Claudelands Bridge and the sharrows in that section as well.
When will that happen? Is that after it happens or?
So what we tend to do is put media release out just as the work's starting and then run it once it's opened. So we work with our comms team on that.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Robin. Thank you, Chair Martin.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Martin. My question was just around getting a detailed visual kind of design of this that is more explicit than what we've got right now, and then making that a requirement for all other projects. I'm just interested in what is the additional cost and what cost ramifications would that have in terms of doing that for everything that comes to this committee, because I'm just concerned that could be substantial.
So I guess, Councillor Sarah, this was a question that Councillor Ewan asked previously, potentially
yes,
you missed.
I was asking it just, I guess, to clarify what impact that would have.
I can't give you an exact figure on the cost because each project will be a case-by-case basis. It's just about some time with a CAD drafting team drawing up plans to a higher level. As I noted earlier, this has been the sort of standard level of drawing that we do for the work of this nature. We don't generally get into more detailed pictures, but if that's something that the elected members would like to see, then that's something that we can look into and provide.
I mean, I was personally comfortable with the designs generally of what I saw. It made sense, but I just was because there was interest from others around it. I was just keen to know what it would cost in terms of whether we're looking at a large cost or relatively minor in the scheme of things.
It will be very much a case-by-case basis, just depending on how big the scheme is. At yesterday's committee, we presented on Anzac Bridge, for example, which was a far longer section, and that would take obviously longer to then get drawn up to that higher quality. So it very much is a case-by-case basis on the project.
I think just as a point of process to assist Councillor Thompson, I'm going to request that Councillor Van Oosten, who's indicated, I'm going to request Councillor Van becomes the mover of the staff recommendation. I'm then going to seek a seconder for the staff recommendation, since when I've had notice of an amendment by Councillor Wilson, which I will intend to second as an individual member of this committee, obviously. So first of all, just to, before we move to that, and then we'll take discussion and debate, are there any other questions before I move to the discussion for this item?
Just a brief
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just a brief one, just for clarification. Robin, you said that a slightly more detailed plan, having brought together all your current thinking into a visualisation, could come back to the next hearings committee, which I understand is next week. Is that right? Because I think there was, or is there two next month? Because I know there was one.
Yeah, there's two next month, but we weren't intending to come to the 3rd of March, and I'm not even sure whether it's being held. Sorry, Amy might be able to confirm that.
Robin wouldn't have time to complete that, as that agenda will be going out today, and it was already actually being
There's a
completed.
later
But the
one, there's a later-
24th of March,
Right.
dependent on the number of additional submitters.
Okay. I'm just trying to be helpful here, Mr. Chair. If you were to bring that back on the 24th of March, would that still enable the timeline, having, in theory, us approve it in principle today, just with the need to see the final optics of what this will look like? Could you still achieve your timeline of June?
Yes, we could. If we had an indication in principle, so that we're not
In principle.
not investing time unnecessarily, I guess.
So simply asking for slightly more detail is not going to limit your ability to implement this by June.
Correct.
Thank you.
So the word, I think you'll be working on the amendment, a proven principle subject to, all right?
Just essentially, Mr. Chair, are you going to move all the other elements
how are you going to do that? What I'll actually do to keep it simple, I think, I'll ask Councillor Van Oosten to move, if she would, and it's your call, move 2A, B, C, D and E, and I'll seek a seconder for that omnibus motion. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Van Oosten's motion that she is now moving the staff recommendations in terms of A, B, C and D and E, since when I'm aware there's an amendment coming up for D and E. Do I have a seconder? Seconder Councillor Thompson. So basically we have Councillor Van Oosten moving the staff recommendation as per the agenda, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Since when I understand Councillor Wilson is just working on an amendment which I assume would be related to refer to D and E, which is essentially proving in principle subject to, I think. Perhaps, Robin, you might want to assist with the exact wording that would... Sorry. Oh.
Yeah, so Max...
We've got some proposed wording that we think will work for you.
Okay, we're going to look at some proposed wording that may... Look at the screen. Just going to come up, or
Yes.
Where's Councillor Thompson gone?
Just has a camera off.
Oh, okay, it's all right. It's all right.
We also have Mark.
We note the presence of Councillor Bunting.
Mr. Chair, I just want to check that the mover of the motion, Maxine, wouldn't consider simply asking in regards to D and E that a detailed, single-page detailed graphic isn't brought back in March, but otherwise, I'm just asking if she would not incorporate that in the motion. That doesn't seem an unreasonable request, but if she won't,
Well,
I'll
obviously
make an
that's
amendment.
that's up to Councillor Van Oosten and Councillor Sarah as the move and seconder, if they're prepared to incorporate that in the motion or not. And just let's be clear what we're requesting them to incorporate in terms of. So,
I think
noting that approves in principle the following addition to the Register 11 turning movements of the Hamilton Traffic Bylaw 2015 as set out below, noting that a detailed design will be brought to the Hearings and Engagement Committee meeting of the 24th of March 2021. So so the suggested change of wording is approving in principle, and then noting that the detailed design will be brought back to this this committee. Obviously, that's entirely up to Councillor Van Oosten and Councillor Thompson as seconder whether you wish to incorporate that or not.
I am open to that, as long as it doesn't impact on the ability to move forward with the project and see it implemented in June.
Robin, sorry, Mr. Chair, I asked that question of Robin. Would Robin just like to reconfirm through you, Mr. Chair, that wouldn't impact or would, so that Councillor Max...
I think having the approval in principle will allow us to get on and do the work we need to, and what I'll do is look to reiterate and put in the next committee meeting the final approval. So I guess it's giving staff a direction that you are generally happy with the proposal, you just want some more detail. And so we can do our investigation work, and then the final approval, we will put that through the next committee so that that's formalised.
Right, and if the seconder is happy with that, then...
Is the seconder happy? Because she is.
That's fine.
Okay, fine. Okay, that now becomes part of the substantive motion. What I now propose to do is take the entire motion as per moved by Councillor Van Oosten. As is standing orders and procedure, I invite the move of the motion to commence discussion.
Thank you, and this item came up yesterday for a great deal of discussion and a lot of passion around the ability for us to be able to really take advantage of infrastructure and investment that we've already made, and to be able to enable more connectedness from our central city through to the eastern side of the city. I see as a way for us to be able to signal to the public that a change is coming and that there is new hierarchies of use of our roads, and that in fact that's something that the public are asking for as well. We have a little bit more detail to be able to see, and you can see in those photographs that it is a little bit ambiguous, and that in the biking lane you can see a couple of cars, and so I can understand Councillor Ewan's point about seeing a clearer picture of what we might be able to expect on that point as well. I'm also comforted by the fact that there will be a comms package going ahead during the time that the works start and its implementation, to bring the public along with us so that they've got a really clear understanding of what to expect and how it might be used. And also, I do note that after yesterday's conversation around other projects that Waka Kotahi may be supporting, or the future difficulties around funding that they may have, that they've already approved this section, and that's really comforting for the kind of movement that we want to be able to see and enable around our city, the use of our roads, the promotion of mode shift, of using our cycles in order to be able to get into the city and around our city. I use that particular intersection and have found it very awkward and difficult to be able to get off my bike, push the button, cross Victoria Street, push the pedestrian button again, manoeuvre myself into a situation where I can turn right and join the traffic on the bridge. And I see this as being a perfect solution to enable that. The proof will be in the pudding, I guess, and the ability for us to be able to message that is for cyclists only, and that will be the job of the signage, the lights, and the comms team in order to be able to get that across. So I urge you to all support this motion. Kia ora.
Seconder, Councillor Thompson.
That was an old hand. I don't want to make the meeting any longer than it's given. We've thrashed this yesterday, but the idea of the detailed design sounds fine. It will be good to, I guess, see more clearly what things will look like. So look forward to seeing that. Thanks.
Councillor Bunting, I note that you've joined us, but you have been present from during the discussion, so obviously that is your call whether you exercise a vote on this or not, but you've definitely been here for the discussion. Do you want to add anything at this stage, Councillor Bunting? For some reason he doesn't have a sound.
There we go. Can you hear me there?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I seem to have lost my meeting somewhere, but I can still hear it. So, no, I have nothing more to add. I think it's the right thing to do, obviously, and if we need to see a bit more optics over it, I have absolutely no problem with it, because I'm completely confident if NZTA say it's a great idea, Martin Parks and the team have worked this through, comparing to other options, I'm confident in that process. yeah, I'm more than happy, and I'm happy with Robin's reassurance that that it won't stall progress on the project. So if we go into it with more confidence as a result, it's only going to be better.
Before I do a quick sum up, Councillor Wilson, do you have anything to add? Right. Just very quickly, obviously this item did come up in discussion yesterday at the Infrastructure Committee. Very clearly, this committee has a different criteria and a different legislative responsibility, and we are, if you like, a regulatory committee, but I think I'll be supporting this particular motion for the simple reason that in no way is it designed to unduly frustrate a particular proposal. Obviously the proposal is very consistent with the Broad Council policy in terms of moving to multimodal forms of transport, as we would say, and certainly it is crystal clear that this council, through its policy and approach, is wanting to make the Claudelands Bridge route friendly for multimodal in terms of cyclists, and of course if that is a consequence of slowing some motorists down as well, so be it, and I've certainly been the motorist and I've been quite happy to slow down. It hasn't made one iota of impact in terms of my ability to get to the CBD. Having said that, I would be extremely cautious, and I would frankly think a right turn for motorists would totally then defeat the purpose of what we're trying to achieve in that part of the city. So I think, Councillor Wilson, I think there will be cases where this committee would want to do a deep dive and have further detail in terms of the proposals and the drawings. In this case, this is all that is doing, and that deep dive will be modal neutral, if that's the word, so it may be a traffic issue, maybe a roading, a roundabout issue. We may choose to do a deep dive as well. So this is not just doing a deep dive because it happens to be a particular design for cycling. The deep dive is all about the totality of the traffic management of that section of Victoria Street. So I think this is quite a sensible and good approach, and in no way will it affect the actual on-the-ground implementation of the particular project, subject to those detailed drawings. Councillor Maxine Van Oosten, in reply.
No need for right of reply. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I will now put the staff recommendation, which is to receive the report, approve the changes to parking restriction controls, ref the blood service development on the corner of London Street and Anglesey Street, approve the following addition to Register 9 with regard to the Nisbet Street, and D, approve the motion as per the discussion we've just had comprehensively with regard to the Victoria Street Claudelands Bridge cycle proposal. All those in favour will just raise your hands, and on the Zoom, just raise your hands.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. We now move to item, Robin, if you'd like to join us, we now move to item 6, temporary road closures for upcoming events, page 33.
So basically, there is a process for putting temporary road closures for events in place, and the Transport Vehicular Traffic Road Closures Regulations 1965 is the normal process we use, and is the process that we use for probably 95% of events. That does require us putting a notice out to the public at least 42 days prior to that event. Every now and then we have situations where that notification hasn't happened, and that we try and minimise that, but certainly with the current COVID restrictions and changes that has come through, we've ended up with a couple more this time than what we would normally plan to. So we have 4 events that we're seeking approval for temporary road closures. We have the Chinese Lantern Festival, which is a closure of the Worley Place shed zone just immediately outside Chambers. We have a Super Rugby match on the 5th of March, which will result in the normal closures that we have for rugby matches. The rest of the rugby matches for the season are being advertised through the normal channels. We have a Children's Day planned on the 6th of March, again in Worley Place, utilising Garden Place in the Civic Square, so ability to close the shed zone. And then finally we have the Balloons Over Waikato 2021 event. The process that we need to follow requires us to put notification out to the public of this meeting and our intention to make a decision. We also have to consult with the New Zealand Police and Waka Kotahi, which has been done and they have approved. And pending the approval from this committee of the closures, we will then put a notice of decision out to the public as well of the intended closures. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Just have one question about process, because obviously being within the 45 day?
42 day.
42 days. But the device, which in the circumstances, it's through the Local Government Act, is that correct?
Correct.
And I'm wondering if we should just have a clear minute note of that, in terms of, so it's crystal clear in the circumstances, just for the record, that's all. Because obviously you've explained it quite well because of COVID and other issues. Are there any questions, Councillor Wilson?
Robin, just for confirmation, with these road closures, does it enable someone to be able to leave and to return to their home?
Correct, yes.
From your experience, are the security staff and managers of these road closure areas made aware of that inherent right of individuals to be able to leave and return home to their residence?
They should be, and I guess there's always a difficulty with staff turnover and that sort of thing, but that is certainly something that, yes.
And could you explain to me what we do in our regulatory function to ask those organisations who are given the role of policing these road closures, of ensuring their staff are educated and made aware of that legal obligation to let people depart and return to their home?
I wouldn't be able to say exactly. It's certainly something that we can reiterate in the same way we reiterate around the traffic management needs to cater for pedestrians and cyclists as well, and obviously, so they're all, I guess, standard components. I'm not aware of any issues, but certainly happy to reiterate that back through and to deal with any occasions where there have been issues.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if you'd be comfortable if we added either as a minute note or as an additional letter to the recommendation asking staff to, in writing to the organisers of these events, to re-highlight their obligations to advise their staff or the contracted party they use to manage these road closures that their staff have to be aware of. And I'm happy to explain why I'm going on about this.
I'm just going to get Amy's advice in terms of process, because obviously, Robin, you can do that, yes, as I understand it. But Amy, is it just as easy, just as we've done the minute note with regard to the device, like Local Government Act, item 4, but just members of the committee also...
What I'd be suggesting is a staff action, which would be staff undertake to contact the relevant parties to ensure they are aware of the process.
And should that be part of the motion, or
it
not?
Isn't required to be part of the motion.
Sorry?
It isn't required to be
so
part of the
minute,
motion.
so it's a minute.
Robin has already indicated that she will do so.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. It's just I've had recently 2 or 3 complaints of people who live in downtown city apartments where Victoria Street was closed and security tried to prevent people leaving their residence and returning, and it created quite a confrontation. And so I just wanted to ensure that security people were aware of the
that's
legal
good. And I'm
obligations.
sure the member used all his mediation skills to assist our officers at the time.
It wasn't actually me, but it was somebody in the building.
But it's a good, and what you do seriously raise is particularly in terms of, as we move into it, what's the word, urban density and high, apartments, not just here, but around major venues, that whole issue. Robin, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that?
Yes, so I guess there's 2 points. We need to be clear about events versus roadworks, because there will be cases for roadworks, for example, where it may not be physically or safe for people to move through. But in those cases, there should be clear communication about how that will be dealt with, and, for example, where people could park their cars so that they still can get access to it. And then in events, we obviously need to be careful about how those vehicles move through those areas as well, because we obviously have closed the road to maintain safety for the people attending the event. So, yes, I think it's just with those understanding that, and there's no reason why that can't be worked through as part of the person talking to the security guard. The security guard should be able to indicate where they can go and how they need to proceed.
Cool. Thank you.
Fine. Is there any other questions on that particular item from our members on Zoom? Nothing? Right. Oh, sorry.
Just a follow-up from that, Robin, in terms of residents within those sites, do they also have the knowledge that they can, if they need to or choose to, leave and return to the area?
I will make that clear to the organisers, because the organisers are expected to do letter drops and to engage with the community, affected by these closures as part of the events. So I will ask that they not only make the staff who are manning the closures, but also that any comms that they do to the community.
Thank you, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Because often if you are confronted with a person in authority, people are less likely to challenge, except for those in Ewan's apartment, of course.
Robin, I'm going to put this motion, and then I'm just going to get you just to give us a quick visuality of the next, some of the issues coming up, I think, as per the pre-brief, if you would.
That's fine.
So if there's no further discussion on this item, I will, did we move? I will move, seconded by Deputy Chair, that staff recommendation as per page 33 and 34 and 35. And also we've got the minute note in terms of the relevance of the Local Government Act and the issue around access and staff undertaking that. Is there any discussion on that now? If there's no discussion, I will put the motion. Please raise your hands. Those in favour, please raise your hands.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Now, just Rob, you just did a couple of updates as to the next, I think the next couple.
Oops, sorry. So just, I guess, having a little bit of a look at the year ahead for